Well, good morning and welcome to Tuesdays with the Pilgrim as we continue reading Harold Bell Wright's book, The Shepherd of the Hills, with chapters 31 and 32. Chapter 31, Castle Building. The corn was big enough to cultivate the first time, and young Matt with old Kate was hard at work in the field west of the house. It was nearly 3 weeks since the incident at the mill, since which time the young fellow had not met Sammy Lane to talk with her. He had seen her, though, at a distance nearly every day, for the girl had taken up her studies again, and spent most of her time out on the hills with the shepherd. That day he saw her as she turned into the mill road at the lower corner of the field, on her way to the forks. And he was still thinking of her 3 hours later as he sat on a stump in the shade of the forest edge, while his horse was resting. Young Matt recalled the fight at the mill with a wild joy in his heart. Under the circumstances, it was no small thing to have defeated the champion strongman and terror of the hills. It was a glorious thing to have done the deed for the girl he loved and under her eyes. Sammy might give herself to Ollie now, and go far away to the great world, but she would never forget the man who had saved her from insult when her lover was far too weak to even save himself. And young Matt would stay in the hills alone, but always he would have the knowledge and the triumph of this thing that he had done. Yes, it would be easier now, but still the days would be years when there was no longer each morning the hope of somewhere before the day was gone that he would see her. The sun fell hot and glaring on the hillside field, and in the air was the smell of the freshly turned earth. High up in the blue sky a hawk circled and circled again. A puff of air came sighing through the forest, touched lightly the green blades in the open, slipped over the ridge, and was lost in the sky beyond. Old Kate, with head down, was dreaming of cool springs and shady dells, and a little shiny brown lizard with a bright blue tail crept from under the bottom rail of the fence to see why the man was so still. The man turned his head quickly, the lizard dodged under the rail, and old Kate awoke with a start. Someone was coming along the road below. Young Matt knew the step of that horse as well as he knew the sound of old Kate's bell or the neigh of his own sorrel. The brown pony stopped at the lower corner of the field, and a voice called out, "You better be at work. I don't believe you have plowed 3 rows since I passed." The big fellow went eagerly down the hill to the fence. "I sure ought to have done better than that, for it's been a long enough since you went by. I always notice, though, that it gets a heap further to the other side of the field and back about this time of day. What's new over on the forks?" Sammy laughed. "Couldn't hear a thing but how the champion strongman was beaten at his own game. Uncle Ike says, 'By thunders, you tell young Matt that he'd better come over. A man what can ride Wash Gibbs like a bug hunting is too blame good a man to stay at home all the time. We want him to tell us how he done it, by thunders. He'll be a-getting a job with the government next, what?" The man crossed his arms on the top rail of the worm fence and laughed. It was good to have Sammy deliver her message in just that way. "I reckon Uncle Ike thinks I ought to go a-dancing all over the hills now, with a chip on my shoulder," he said. "I don't think you'll do that," she returned. "Dad Howard wouldn't, would he? But I must hurry on now, or Daddy's supper won't be ready when he comes in. I stopped to give you these papers for your father." She handed him the package. "And I want to thank you, Matt, for what you did at the mill. All my life you have been fighting for me, and I have never done anything for you. I wish I could do something that would show you how I care." Her voice faltered. He was so big and strong, and there was such a look of hopeless love and pain on his rugged face, a face that was as frank and open as a child's. Here was a man who had no need of the shallow cunning of little fox-like men. This one would go open and bold on his way, and that which he could not take by his strength he would not have. Had she not seen him in battle? Had she not seen his eyes like polished steel points? Deep down in her heart, the woman felt a thrill of triumph that such a man should stand so before her. She must go quickly. Young Matt climbed slowly up the hill again to his seat on the stump. Here he watched until across the hollow he saw the pony and his rider come out of the timber and move swiftly along the ridge. Watched until they faded into a tiny spot, rounded the mountain, and disappeared from sight. Then, lifting his eyes, he looked away beyond the long blue line that marked the distant horizon. Some day he would watch Sammy ride away, and she would go on and on and on, beyond that blue line, out of his life forever. Ollie had gone over there to live, and the shepherd had come from there. What was that world like, he wondered? Between the young man and the mountains and that big world yonder, there had always been a closely shut door. He had seen the door open to Ollie, and now Sammy stood on the threshold. Would it ever open for him? And if it did, what? Then came a thought that made his blood leap. Might he not force it open? The shepherd had told him of others who had done so. Young Matt felt a strong man's contempt for the things Ollie had gotten out of the world, but he stood in awe before Mr. Howitt. He told himself now that he would look for and find the things yonder that made Dad the man he was. He would carry to the task his splendid strength. Nothing should stop him. And Sammy, when she understood that he was going away to be like the shepherd, would wait a while to give him his chance. Surely she would wait when he told her that. But how should he begin? Looking up again, his eyes caught a slow shifting patch of white on the bench above Lost Creek, where the little stream begins its underground course. The faint bark of a dog came to him through the thin, still air, and the patch of white turned off into the trail that leads to the ranch. "Dad!" exclaimed the young man in triumph. Dad should tell him how. He had taught Sammy. And so while the sunlight danced on the green field, and old Kate slept in the lengthening shadows of the timber, the lad gave himself to his dreams and built his castles, as we all have built. His dreaming was interrupted as the supper bell rang, and, with the familiar sound, a multitude of other thoughts came crowding in. The father and mother, they were growing old. Would it do to leave them alone with the graves on the hill yonder, and the mystery of the hollow? And there was the place to care for, and the mill. Who but young Matt could get work from the old engine? It was like the strong man that the fight did not last long. Young Matt's fights never lasted very long. By the time he had unhitched old Kate from the cultivator, it was finished. The lad went down the hill, his bright castles in ruin, even as we all have gone, or must sometimes go down the hill with our brightest castles in ruin. Chapter 32. Preparation. That same night, Mr. Lane told his daughter that he would leave home early the next morning and be gone 2 days. Jim was cleaning his big 45 when he made the announcement. Sammy paused with one hand on the cupboard door to ask, "With Wash Gibbs, Daddy?" "No, I ain't going with Wash, but I'll likely meet up with him before I get back." There was a hint of that metallic ring in the man's voice. The girl placed her armful of dishes carefully on the cupboard shelf. You're not going to forget your promise, are you, Daddy Jim?" The mountaineer was carefully dropping a bit of oil onto the lock of his big revolver. "No, girl, I ain't forgetting nothin'. This here's the last ride I aim to take with Wash. I'm a-goin' to see him to—" He paused and listened carefully to the click, 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 as he tested the action of his weapon. "To keep my promise." "Oh, Daddy, Daddy, I'm so glad. I wanted this more than I ever wanted anything in my lifetime. You're such a good daddy to me. I never could bear to see you with that bad, bad man." She was behind his chair now, and stooping, laid her fresh young cheek against his swarthy, furrowed face. The man sat like a grim stone image, his eyes fixed on the gun resting on his knees. Not until she lifted her head to stand erect behind his chair, with a hand on each shoulder, did he find words. "Girl, there's just one thing I got to know for sure before I go tomorrow. I reckon I'm right, but somehow a man can't never tell about a woman and such things. Will you tell your daddy, Sammy?" "Tell what, Daddy Jim?" the girl asked, her hands stealing up to caress her father's face. "What answer will you give young Matt when he asks you what all he did?" "But why must you know that before you go tomorrow?" "'Cause I want to be plumb sure I ain't making no mistake in siding with the boy in this here trouble." "You couldn't make a mistake in doing that, Daddy, no matter what, but perhaps Matt will not ask me what Ellie did." Just a ray of humor touched the dark face. "I ain't making no mistake there. I know what a man will do." He laid his gun upon the table and reached up and caught his daughter's hand. "But I want to know what you'll say when he asks. Tell me, honey, so I'll be plumb certain I'm doing right." Sammy lowered her head and whispered in his ear. "Are you sure this time, girl? Dead sure?" "Oh, I'm so sure that it seems as if I couldn't wait for him to come to me. I never felt this way, never before." The mountaineer drew his daughter into his arms and held her close as he said, "I ain't afraid to do it now, girl." The young woman was so occupied with her own thoughts and the emotions aroused by her father's questions that she failed to note the ominous suggestion that lay under his words. So she entered gaily into his plans for her during his 2-day absence. Jim would leave early in the morning, and Sammy was to stay with her friend Mandy Ford over on Jake Creek. Mr. Lane had arranged with Jed Holland to do the milking, so there would be no reason for the girl's return until the following evening, and she must promise that she would not come home before that time. Sammy promised laughingly. He need not worry. She and Mandy had not had a good visit for weeks. When his daughter said good night, Jim extinguished the light and, slipping the big gun inside his shirt, went to sit outside the cabin door with his pipe. An hour passed. Sammy was fast asleep, and still the man sat smoking. A half-hour more went by. Suddenly the pipe was laid aside, and Jim's hand crept inside his shirt to find the butt of his revolver. His quick ear had caught the sound of a swiftly moving horse coming down the mountain. The horse stopped at the gate, and a low whistle came from out of the darkness. Leaving his seat, Sammy's father crossed the yard, and a moment later the horse with its rider was going on again, down the trail towards the valley below and the distant river. Jim waited at the gate until the sound of the horse's feet had died away in the night. Then he returned to the cabin. But even as he walked toward the house, a dark figure arose from the clump of bushes within a few feet of the spot where Jim and the horseman had met. The figure slipped noiselessly away into the forest. The next morning, Jim carefully groomed and saddled the brown pony for Sammy. Then, leading his own horse, ready for the road, he came to the cabin door. "Going now, Daddy?" said the girl, coming for a goodbye kiss. My girl, whispered the man as he took her in his arms. Sammy was frightened at the sight of his face, so strange and white. "Why, Daddy Jim, what's the matter?" "Nothing, girl, nothing. Only you're so like your mother, girl. She used to come just this way when I was a-leaving. You're sure like her, and I'm glad. I'm glad you're like the old folk, too. Remember now, you stay at Mandy's until tomorrow evening. Kiss me again, honey. Goodbye." He mounted hurriedly and rode away at a brisk gallop. Pulling up a moment at the edge of the timber, he turned in the saddle and waved his hand to the girl in the cabin door. And that's the end of Chapter 32. We'll continue next week with Chapter 33, A Ride in the Night. Until then, take care, stay safe, and God bless. Also, if you haven't entered for the giveaway, you'll have to go back and watch last week's video, Chapters 29 and 30, and at the end of that video, I explain how to enter the draw. So, please go and check that out if you haven't entered already. The only qualifications to enter are to have watched the video, of course, and to have a mailing address that you're willing to share with me via email so that I can mail you your prize. Otherwise, if I can't get your prize to you, there's not much point entering the contest. All right, I hope you'll have a wonderful week. God bless.